What's going on, everyone? It's RZ over here at Bukugames, and I'm here with yet another devlog, the first one of 2024. So happy new year to all of you guys. I know it's pretty late. We're over here at the end of January doing a devlog for you guys, but you know, we've been hard at work at Cursed Kingdom and we just didn't have time to do that, and we're probably not gonna have time to do many more, but we're gonna try our best to pump out more for you guys. That being said, let's get right into today's topic, which is gameplay phases. Now, what exactly does that mean? Phases essentially are the way that the sequential order of things happen in a board game. So when you're playing a board game, you know, a person's turn happens, they got to do something, whether it's rolling dice, whether it's choosing an action to do, something else, and then the next person's turn comes after certain things have happened. I know it's pretty vague in how I'm describing it, but it is a pretty general idea of what we're going for here. So Cursed Kingdom is no different. We're going to have phases during our gameplay. You're going to have certain things that have to happen on the player's turn before it can get to the next player's turn and whatnot. And in each of those phases, you will also have a lot of different mechanics and a lot of different resource management and other things that you'll have to take into account. But the cool part is, because it's digital, we're doing all of that for you on the back end. So I just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea of what's happening in each of those phases, and that way you guys can get a little bit more of understanding, and it's not a bad idea to understand what's happening behind the scenes, at least a little bit. So without further ado, let's get right into Unity, and I will start explaining. Alright guys, so I'm just going to go through each of the phases here, and I would like to preface this by saying a lot of this is very explicit in terms of we're kind of showing you everything that's happening. We're still in talks about what to show, what not to show to players, so any and all feedback is great to know what you want to see here, and what you feel is a bit too much, and you're going to be like, well, if I have to skip this every single time or see this animation every single time, I'm going to get annoyed, so let me just not see this and let it happen in the background or something like that. But with that being said, let's get right into the first phase here, which is start phase. So it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? This is the start of a player's turn. Long story short, what's going to happen is you're going to have a little animation here that shows, and then you're going to have a pop-up here with turn start, and then your players, whatever ID you have, number you have here, your name, and you'll have a little button that you can click to start your turn. Now, in general, there won't be much other UI here, but just for testing purposes, we have it set up like this. But long story short, you're just starting your turn. It's a way to notify you to say, hey, it's your turn, time to go. Maybe we'll have some feedback, controller vibrations, or a sound effect playing, or something like that. But there's not much else to say about start phase. That's it. That's what it is. It's the start of the turn. Once you click that button, you'll go into the Resolve Start Space Effects phase. Yes, very originally named. I am well aware that it looks pretty crazy. There are some spaces that we have gone over in Cursed Kingdom, such as the Sand Dune space, and there are other ones such as the Masterful Magic space, which I may have a graphic up here to show you guys. And essentially those spaces have effects that happen at the beginning of a turn if you were on those spaces when your turn starts. Now you got to be careful because some of those can be negative. For the two I just explained, those cut your movement cards in half, is essentially values in half. It's essentially like you're cursed. So you got to be careful on what effects you're going to be triggering when you start your turn, but that's pretty much what happens here. If there are no space effects to resolve, then you don't have to worry about this space. You're golden and you can start your turn. Now this is the most important phase, movement phase. There are a multitude of things you can do in movement phase despite it being called movement phase. Yes, the main goal is to move to your next destination, to get around the board so that you can level up, become stronger, and take down your opponents. But there are many other things you can do in movement phase, so I'm just going to let it play out here. And you can see, like, I have free control. I can do whatever I want. I can look at my movement cards, I can look at my support cards, and this is actually pretty interesting here. So we have certain cards here that can only be used in certain phases. For support cards specifically, you'll notice there is an icon in this little orb here at the bottom of the bottom left of the support cards. These icons indicate which phase you are allowed to use a support card in. If it has the little adventurer symbol, that means you can only use a support card in movement phase, kind of signifying that you're moving. This icon here is a special icon. That essentially means there are only special conditions that have to be met before you can use the support card. Usually the support card itself will let you know when you can use it. But if I try to use the smoke bomb right now, it's going to tell me I can't use this card right now. This is not the correct phase. It knows that, and essentially, it prevents things like misplays or things that break the game rules that if you were playing a physical board game, you would be able to potentially do by mistake. And we're pretty much just taking away that potential hazard from happening to you guys. So aside from using support cards, which as we mentioned you can do here, you're also going to be given the ability to use your special ability, which we haven't talked about, but that's another thing you can use during movement phase, unless your special ability has a specific condition that needs to be met. And you can also move. So of course, right here, we're just going to select a card here and we're going to do our movement phase. So movement phase does not end until you actually land on the space. So everything up to from you selecting that movement card to getting to the space and actually landing on it is still considered movement phase, and that could be important for a myriad of reasons that we'll get into later down the road. So my player has moved 2 spaces to the treasure chest space, and we're going into the next phase, which is the resolve space effects phase. This is a bit incorrect here, and we're doing this for testing purposes. There is a phase that comes before this that we have shifted for the time being called dual phase. We're not going into dual phase at all right now. It is something we will talk about in the future, but just know that phase comes before the resolve space effects phase. So be on the lookout for that down the line as we make potentially another devlog explaining that. But resolve space effects phase is essentially the same as the start version of it, which is just resolves any space effects that would happen when you land on a space. Here's an example of a space and what goes on with it. Well, actually, I can show you right here. Here's an example of a space. We're going to go onto the treasure chest. It's going to show you its effects here. It's going to tell you can either draw 1 support card or 1 movement card. So that's what's actually being resolved right now. Pretty self-explanatory, I know, but it's good to be able to go through this and show you guys how it's happening. So some space effects will just happen, some will give you a choice. Specifically here for the treasure chest, you're allowed to get a choice of movement or support card, and once you select that, we'll give some feedback to the players showing that they've drawn their card and that the and essentially they'll know when the phase has ended. For the final phase of the game that we have implemented so far, there is end phase. Now, a lot of things can happen on end phase, and I may have to show some B-roll footage here because there is a lot that I'm probably not going to be able to show right now. But that being said, I'm not talking about these in any particular order. There is an order to them, and once the game is launched, we of course will have official rules where you can read specifically in what order these things happen. But I'm just going to list them off, kind of just freeballing it here. I don't know if that's actually a saying, but yeah. So if you are afflicted by status effects / ailments, as we've discussed in the past, during the end phase, those timers will tick, as long as it is not the turn that you have been afflicted. So if you were not afflicted with poison this turn, but you have a turn left of poison, the timer will go down and you will no longer be poisoned. Same with curse. Now that also counts towards the actual effect of a status ailment / effect. Well, if you're poisoned and your timer ticks down, you're actually going to take damage from the poison. So you can kind of plan ahead and know, okay, at the end phase, I got poisoned this turn. At the end phase of next turn, I'm going to get hit with this poison. So before that end phase, I got to do something to get rid of it. Or I got to recover enough health to make sure that I can handle the poison. Aside from status effect related things, you will also draw 1 movement card. Every character draws a movement card at the end phase, unless there are outlying effects or external factors that affect that, but in general, you will always draw a movement card at the end phase. That ensures that every player has a movement card to use when their turn comes up. However, of course, when it's not your turn, your cards can be potentially pilfered / stolen from you, so you gotta be on the lookout for that, and you may just start your turn without a movement card, in which case, you'll be at the mercy of RNG. And in a nutshell, that's pretty much how the game flows. That's what phases in games are, whether it's a card game, a board game, or whatnot. And the cool part is that when you're playing a physical board game, sometimes you might get too caught up in the moment, you and your friends are having a good time, and you just forget a certain play or that something was supposed to happen in a current phase. And then everyone's breaking rules and you're just like, wait, this wasn't supposed to happen, now the whole game state is ruined. When it comes to Cursed Kingdom, a digital board game, it's awesome because all this stuff's being handled in the background, so all you have to worry about is planning your next move. Who are you going to attack next? What are you going to do to get rid of your current status effects or heal up or plan to level up or whatnot, and where you're going to land and all these different things. You get to think about all that and not about, oh man, whose turn is it next, what's going to happen, what's all this other stuff that might confuse you. But with that being said, this has been an awesome start to our devlogs. I cannot wait to share more about Cursed Kingdom with you guys this year in 2024, and we're going to be continuing to be hard at work on it. So be sure to follow us on all our social medias and be sure to keep up to date with Bukugames. That being said, I've been RZ, and remember guys, if it's not fun, it's not worth it. I'll see you guys in the next one.